Let's fire it up. Let's get the old breaking news sounder back. Boom.
Breaking news. Oh, snap. News is broken. Breaking news.
They have hired Will Dawkins as their new general manager. Now, normally this would be a stop the show, like full breaking news mode type of story. But we know that Dawkins is not the most important hire. Not to push back on Will Dawkins, his importance, like the number two, the guy who's going to run the day-to-day operations of the franchise, is a really important hire. So I do want to stop down and talk a little bit more about Dawkins, what I know, what we've been able to learn over the last hour and a half or so that this news has been out. We're still working on getting someone who covers the Thunder to talk. I don't know that it's going to happen today. We might have a lot more tomorrow. I would also anticipate a press conference where Michael Winger, Dawkins, and Travis Schlenk talk, at least the top two, at least Winger and Dawkins talk later this week, and we're hoping, obviously, to sit down with them. So more on that to come. My guess is later in the week, back half of the week. But yeah, because of the hiring of Michael Winger, because we know he's the man, he's the number one guy, he's the one that's going to have the biggest say in like a Bradley Beal trade, for instance, or what happens with Porzingis. Like, this is a 7.5, 8 as opposed to a 10 in terms of the newsiness level of it. That said, it's still really important. So who is Will Dawkins? Dawkins is a guy that worked his way up in, I would argue, the best front office in the league. What Oklahoma City does is remarkable. They have no help in terms of their location. They're a small market. Oklahoma City is a, relatively speaking, small town by NBA standards. I mean, Oklahoma City is a real city. I don't know, Anthony, if you've ever been there. No time in Oklahoma City?
Not yet.
Okay. Not yet.
The world tour still continues.
The Oklahoma City Tourist Bureau, did you hear that? Anthony Haney might still visit your town. But I mean, I used to actually spend a little bit of time there. I had one of my best friends from college lived there, and it's about a 3-hour drive from Dallas. So when I lived in Dallas, I would pop up every once in a while. I'd go to when the Mavs were not in the playoffs, I would try to go get a credential and cover a Thunder playoff game. Did that once or twice in my 2.5 years in Dallas. So like I spent a little bit of time there. It's a real city. Like there's suburbs, there's a downtown, there's the whole thing, but it's certainly not New York City. It's certainly not Washington, D.C. It's certainly not L.A. It's certainly not Miami. It's certainly not Milwaukee even. Like it's pretty small by big city sports or major sports standards. And so the fact that they continuously create an organization that players have nothing but great things to say about, that, KD stayed there for a decade, Russ really didn't want to leave. It was kind of the best thing for the organization, something that, by the way, I think we should talk about, that idea of what's best for the organization, despite a player who is synonymous with said organization and has been there a long time, but isn't good enough to be the best player on a championship team. Wow, this sounds familiar. It's remarkable what Sam Presti has done. And the thing, and remember, Michael Winger also, prior to his time with the Clippers, was with the Oklahoma City Thunder organization. So these are guys that work together, know each other. Dawkins started in OKC the year that they moved from Seattle down to Oklahoma City. So he's been with the organization a long time, including Winger's years there, before Winger left for LA and then they reunite here in Washington. But the thing that you always hear about the Thunder is they are just first class in everything that they do. They are an organization that has built incredible training facilities, incredible training staff. They, have every amenity you could think of for players. They help players with their charitable work. There's just a way of doing business that endears people to that organization and has them tolerate living in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, when they're an NBA superstar. They make it the best basketball place to be that you possibly can. And as a result, they've done a lot of winning. They haven't won a title, but the fans, by the way, are also super invested because it's the only pro sports thing they have. It's that in Oklahoma, like University of Oklahoma athletics, but In terms of pro sports, it's that and AAA baseball. And so there is a passion in the fan base there that creates an incredible atmosphere. And all that, plus, the good scouting and great player development means that they win. And sure, they took a bit of a hiatus in the post-Russ era to reset things. But in that, they get Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. They have a bunch of young studs, the Josh Giddeys, and obviously we'll see what Chet Holmgren is, who missed all of last year after being the number 2 overall pick. They got 2 dudes named Jalen Williams, both of whom are good. Like, they just got good players, and they know how to find guys that fit what they want to do, and they know how to develop them and bring them along. And I think the biggest thing as I think about it, though, with the Oklahoma City ties here, and if I'm Ted, I don't know whether this is a conscious or a subconscious or not even on the radar, but a nice boost to have, something they need to think about is these are the guys that, along with Sam Presti, traded Russell Westbrook. And I think it's important for people to realize what Russell Westbrook meant to OKC and what OKC meant to Russ. Russ was the guy who stayed. And when Kevin Durant left, the vitriol that has since worn down some, but the vitriol towards Durant, who was their beloved hero, was extreme. It wasn't good. I'm not endorsing it. I'm just describing it. I'm not saying it was a good thing. It was rather inhumane. Some of it, it was childish in a lot of ways. But that's what sports fandom can be sometimes, is this intense, irrational passion that reminds you that the word fan is short for fanatic. And so Durant leaves, and the opposite side of that coin, if the hate goes towards Durant, the love was for Russ. And when Oklahoma City re-signs him and Russ signs this mass extension, this insanely, high 35% supermax contract, basically, everyone just was like, wow, Russ is the man. He's beloved. He locked in that moment with the signature on a contract that was going to pay him over $200 million. The love and adoration of the Oklahoma City Thunder fan base forever. And it was a group that included Will Dawkins that said, hey, man, a year later, hey, man, I think it's probably time to go. And ultimately, they trade him to Houston, to Washington, to L.A., and, we've seen the Russ path since then. But they had to go to him and have that conversation and say, we know you have your roots here. You've got a young family. You have all your charitable work. You have a house you love. You have all of the things. But we can't win if you're our best player. And we don't have a good way to acquire someone else. The best thing for our franchise is to trade you, reset, and hopefully it's good for you. We'll get you to a contender, which obviously they did. They got him to Houston to go play with Harden. Didn't work out, but it was a good idea. And I see why Russ, who had played with Harden in OKC in the first place, thought that would work. And they made the move. Now, Russ didn't have the no trade clause, which does complicate the situation, but that's a delicate conversation. And it's even more delicate here because of the very stupid no trade clause that Ted and the front office that was here gave him last year with Brad. But if you want to pick some guys that have had that conversation before, getting some dudes from OKC, pretty good way to do it. Obviously, Winger did something similar with Blake Griffin. Tobias Harris, not the level of star, but certainly someone who was beloved in LA and loved being there, and they ultimately had to trade him. They're used to making these tough decisions. And there was a clip from a season ticket holder event with the Clippers that we played when Winger got hired, where he talked about the humanity of all of this, that it is hard, but you ultimately have to do it because that's the job. And what the Wizards have done is get capable professionals with experience making tough decisions, who have a great scouting history, and are smart with the salary cap. given their current basketball situation, I do not think they could have done any better. To the point that when we started this process, and I didn't know any of the names involved, I knew nothing about Will Dawkins. I didn't know that Will Dawkins was a human being that existed. That's actually not true. I'm a big enough NBA nerd that I'd heard the name before. But it was kind of one of those like, oh, that rings a bell. Oh, yeah, that's who that guy is. I didn't have any real file on Will Dawkins. But I said, go to the NBA front offices that have done well. Go to your Golden States. Go to your Oklahoma Cities. Go to your Milwaukees. Go to whoever. Miami. Find who the number 2 is and go hire that guy. And what the Wizards did was they took the number 2 from the Clippers, who I would put in that group, the number 2 from OKC, and the former number 2 in Golden State, who built the Hawks into a playoff contender and then got run out of town by the owner's 27-year-old son and his buddy. And they got all 3 of them. That is a good offseason. Now, they've got to do the job now, and there's still a chance it all goes horribly wrong. Because it's the NBA. Nothing's guaranteed. But in terms of evaluating the plan and execution of moving on from Tommy Shepard and moving on from the Shepard-Grunfeld era, getting fresh eyes from the outside who are smart, capable, and know what the hell they're doing based off of their track records, I do not think Ted Leonsis, who has gotten very little praise in the history of this show for any decisions relating to front office personnel, could have done any better.
This is the Hoffman Show on the Team 980 and the Odyssey app.